The first direct talks in more than 2 years between foreign ministers of the G7 industrialised nations are taking place in London. Britain is expected to seek to agree on decisive action from G7 partners to protect democracies against global threats, such as those posed by China and Russia. SABC News correspondent Laura Makin-Isherwood joins us now. A very good evening to you, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us on The Full View. Perhaps the big news coming from the G7 summit is the group of 7 Western democracies intending to court new allies to counter challenges from Russia and as well as China, without, of course, holding down Beijing and while pursuing more stable ties with the Kremlin. What's the latest?
Well, yes, you're right. And of course, with the United Kingdom holding the presidency for the G7 at the moment, that's the reason why these talks are taking place in London right now. They will obviously be trying to lead this kind of collaboration between nations now. The UK, of course, has published its integrated review recently. That was a rethink, a look at how the United Kingdom looks at foreign countries, how it supports different relationships across the globe, and of course a rethink of its foreign policy, defence and security too. The talks that are taking place here will take place over 3 days. We're now in day 2, and of course it includes those key G7 nations, the UK, Canada, Japan, the US, Italy, Germany and France, but there's also been invitations extended to other important countries in the United Kingdom's eyes, and they include ministers from Australia, South Korea, India and South Africa attending too. For South Africa, it's the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Dr. Ndeli Pandor, who is here attending on South Africa's behalf. Tonight she's partaking in a dinner with all of those other ministers from those different G7 nations, and she's also set to hold her own bilateral meetings too. One has already taken place today. That was with India's External Affairs Minister, who tweeted a photograph of the two of them after that meeting had taken place, bumping forearms rather than shaking hands, because of course everybody here is undergoing and observing social distancing measures because of that COVID pandemic. They were pictured with masks on, they were standing slightly apart, but in that tweet from India's External Affairs Minister, he said it had been a useful discussion on working together to meet the COVID challenge, about economic recovery and Commonwealth issues. Now, of course, the COVID pandemic is a big issue that all these nations here are trying to bounce back on. It has dominated the economies of the globe throughout, but there are also another list of other issues that need to be discussed too, like security and potential threats from other hostile states. From South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation, though, they say that their list of priorities will include the promotion and defending of open societies, leading a sustainable recovery through championing action on climate change, as well as famine prevention, among others.
Well, China featured quite prominently in the summit with the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying that it's not their purpose to try to contain China or to hold China down. Why the obsession with China, though?
Well, we know that China has obviously been an emerging economy. There have been real shifts to build in terms of their strength and power, economically at least. And we know from the United Kingdom's decision to deploy HMS Queen Elizabeth, the flagship aircraft carrier, towards the Indo-Pacific in the next month, we're taking in a number of countries as well as sort of stop-off points on the way along that route, as well as building relationships there. It is also sending a message to potential threats and hostile nations. It's believed that China is one of them. Of course, there's a lot of questions around the South China Sea at the moment, and that presence from the United Kingdom's aircraft carrier, as well as a number of other warships, and of course US F-35B fighter jets that will be sent from the Marine Corps and positioned on board that ship, is sort of signalling a real strength in terms of NATO partnerships and really bolstering that message that allies from the West, from the G7, and now trying to incorporate those other guest nations as well, really are watching. It's not necessarily being shown as a threatening action. It's definitely not the message that the Ministry of Defence here is putting across. They're saying it's just a key any sort of message, a movement to just say we're here and we want to remain peaceful.
All right, Laura, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for our update. Well, that was SABC correspondent Laura Makin-Isherwood speaking to us live from London about the G7 summit that is currently in progress.